Good evening and welcome to another Pharaoh Art Stream with myself, Pharaoh, and our wonderful guest this evening, Zach Brown. Hi, Zach, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well.
And I can see that are you in your studio in your house right now? I'm loving the skeleton in the background.
Yeah. So it's actually two skeletons, so that's not a reflection in the window.
Oh,
It is. Yeah, so in the studio, that if you were looking at the other half is all ripped up. And you can see through to where we're putting a shower in on the other side of this room. So switching things around, we're remodeling the one side to make room for the baby and everything. And then my wife's office is going up in the old principal's office. That is our bedroom right now that we're sharing with the baby.
that's great. Did they leave any stuff behind in terms of like old school desks and stuff like that in the space that you could use or repurpose?
No. I mean, we have some old school desks that we're gonna use for Annalise's bedroom, but no. The only thing that we found, we've just found some marbles underneath like some cabinets that we were ripping out from back in the day.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, really nice. So, for those who've tuned in and don't know you, I'll just do a little introduction. So, we've previously spoken. It was after the first Passage Prize, and I think Zach, you came like you got like position 3 or something like that in the.
I think it was second, but yeah.
Sorry, apologies.
No worries, no worries.
Should
It's
have been
okay.
first, as I said at the time. Um, but that's how I kind of first heard about you, and then I got in contact, and then we kind of talked through kind of like your story to date. So if you want the kind of real in-depth background about like where Zach's from, please tune into the other live stream. But I thought it'd be great to kind of catch up again, talk about what you've been up to in the meantime, what's been going on, things that have kind of caught your interest, and also to talk through some of your latest work tonight as well. And yeah, go through some more brilliant paintings. So I guess I think it must have been over a year. What's been going on in your world since we last chatted?
Well, yeah, it's been about over a year. Yeah, had a baby, but that was 5 months ago. We're renovating. Was doing this body of work, and this was the show that almost wasn't. The Here in Pittsburgh, I had this show scheduled for the better part of a year, and I've been working on the show, and then out of the blue, they canceled it very unceremoniously. I was supposed to have an opening over the summer for this body of work, and then it didn't open until October. But I don't take these things lightly or laying down. So talked with the head of the cultural trust here. This wormy son of a bitch, fucking bastard. God damn, just like, and he's giving me the HR talk of like, oh well, we just really wanted to have some programming that reflected our values over the summer during the Three Rivers Art Festival, and we just didn't think it was a good fit. But we wanted to let you know that you're being heard and what you're saying is important to us. I'm just like, okay, shut the fuck up. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to reschedule the show, or you're going to pay me for all the things I bought, like for all the materials I've already put up for so far. Well, anyways.
So step back a second, because
Yeah.
the last time I heard you were kind of planning this show. So this was in conjunction with the state, is it, or like is it part of some kind of arts
with the
festival?
city? Yeah, with the city. So it's during the beginning of the summer, June, they have the Three Rivers Arts Festival. It brings in a lot of people into Pittsburgh, and then this was going to be in one of the main galleries downtown that's owned by the Cultural Trust. Basically, what the Cultural Trust is a real estate holding company that changed all the old porno theaters into like more respectable theaters downtown in Pittsburgh, and then they took all the old kind of jerk shops and adult novelty stores and peep show booths and turned them into gallery spaces.
It's from one form of voyeurism to another, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so that's been going on for a long time. And then they hadn't had a curator for a bit, and I had some friends who were doing the programming. I was lined up for this show, doing this kind of a Death of a Lunar Cult show. Like the kind of catalyst for the show was that boat burial piece that was in the Passage Prize. That
Yes,
was
yeah.
one of the plays. I was originally planning on pairing that with these kind of Greek gods of of night, darkness, sleep, and death. So Erebus, Hypnos, Thanatos, and Nyx. Anyway, so the big boat burial piece sold. So then I was pairing with other stuff, but we'll get to that in a second. Show was they canceled my show. I called around, got a lot of details from everyone. But basically, the whole thing ended with the guy who was running the cultural trust getting fired.
Wow. Well, that's
Yeah.
you know what? I mean, this is the first case of where I've heard someone kind of like get attempted cancelled, and then it like slightly play into their favor. If this was the UK, you would just be kind of like curb stomped and then sort of left on the side. So that's impressive. You've managed to.
Well, Pittsburgh's a small town, and I've built a lot of goodwill with a lot of the our community here over the years, as kind of a lovable prick. And so I just kind of contact a lot of favors to get more information. And then anyways, got the show rescheduled. They hired a new head of curation, and then this guy was let go. So shows what a lot of spite and a little bit of talking can get you.
Well, that's very impressive. I mean, just in terms of the name again, because you said it for a fleeting second. What tell me about the name, and then tell me about did you have to almost kind of pitch the show to these guys as part of the festival, or were these kind of slots available that you could sort of plug into?
So it was already scheduled the show, and it was during. I thought it'd be great to have an opening during the Three Rivers Arts Festival, just get a lot of eyes on the work. And it's not like a kind of like a big international art fair as it used to be. It's more like outside the galleries. It's just kind of a lot of booths of like weekend painters and fun stuff, and guys who take old bullet casings and turn them into ashtrays and stuff like that.
Yes,
But
yes, yeah.
yeah, but it's fun. It's fun. It's
Yeah, no, exactly. It's nice. I always think with those things, it's kind of like, I mean, yeah, maybe there's some of that kind of naive stuff happening there, but they're loving it, and there's always a market for that kind of stuff as well. And that, so I think, and it always has a good vibe at the same time. So.
Plus, I thought it'd be fun to have like this big figurative work up downtown, and freak out the normies, and have some people just really appreciate some like large scale paintings that are shiny and dark, and maybe turn a couple people on who are like some half naked buff dudes.
I like it. Yes, that's very. Like BAP pills, just handsome Thursday brought to you in real life.
We'll shame some fatties as they're walking around eating a funnel cake.
So you got the curator cancelled. It seemed like it. So it all did come together, but it was sort of delayed from the original start time then.
Yeah. So the show was canceled. So I took a teaching position for a semester, just a local college, and oh my goodness, so I had to talk about another series of negotiations. So it was like a week or so before the semester started, and I was contacted by my friend in the painting department there. And he's like, "Would you be interested in teaching a figure drawing class and an intro to drawing class?" I'm like, "Heck yeah, sure." Then do all the background work and everything, and then I was like, "Oh, by the way, what are you paying me?" And they're like offering me less than I was making 10 years ago teaching adjunct at like a similar sized college. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not getting out of bed for this. I know you asked me, but maybe I should have asked up front. So finally
Yeah.
it's not like wasn't the department head's decision. So I was going through HR, and finally they caved and were paying me to do it, because at some point, it's just not worth my time to go out and teach when the time can be better spent, in the studio making the paintings I want to make,
Yeah,
then
of course, yeah.
eventually sell. So anyways, I was doing that and teaching these students. And I don't know what it is, if it's just like a generational thing, or if it was like post COVID, or maybe it's just this, batch of students, but just from like 10 years ago to now, just like the amount of like kind of like, like completely social ineptitude of like the student body, was really
Mm,
shocking. And I don't know,
interesting.
it could have just been this one class, or maybe it's just because like they were like COVID kids. I have no idea, but it was odd. It was an interesting thing. But
Because this at a college, was it, or
yeah,
high school? Sorry. Yeah. So,
yeah,
so I
yeah,
mean, you'd expect them to kind of be like relatively well socialized. It's kind of like it's still like the last dregs of the Zoomers coming in there. I mean, like I've heard a lot of kind of chat from Zoomers kind of going through university right now, and they kind of describe themselves as like this very nihilist generation. A friend of mine who I stream with, academic agent, always says the Zoomers know nothing. They know nothing at all. Like they have no cultural or like knowledge references whatsoever. So it's kind of like it's the first generation totally detached from like shared culture, which I think is quite interesting. So like maybe people of our generation, you'd have that the so-called water cooler moment, where everyone would watch Game of Thrones or something like that, and would be able to talk about it as like a cultural point. But because the Zooms are all like online as the first point of interaction for media,
yeah.
they all live in their own little bubbles and their own little spaces, so they don't have to have that kind of shared communality or kind of something that resonates with the whole group. So
Well, I think it's also interesting to think of Zoomers being raised by like Gen X, and like the very Gen X attitudes, and the kind of like the slacker isolationist kind of thing. But then like Gen X is also used to like having the media directly. Their rebellion was the mainstream, so
mm,
MTV, grunge, the movies. What was That's why like they become like as they get older, they're so used to the media reflecting their views and values and just kind of growing with it. That's why they kind of become fairly like normal, or prescribed to whatever NPR tells them to believe.
yeah, it's that weird thing. I always love like seeing some of the punk memes, where again
Hmm.
it's like a punk where it's kind of like, yeah, punk isn't being like mean to minorities or something like that. Punk isn't, you know what I'm saying? Just like these pathetic
Yeah.
platitudes on the back or whatever. And I'm pretty sure if you to go back to the 70s and ask like some of the original punks their views and that kind of stuff, they wouldn't have the same like all encompassing.
No, look at Johnny Rotten now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because like I did a stream like analyzing. So he did this documentary sort of going around London, and it's really interesting because he is sort of in like this kind of, I don't know, intellectual quandary where I think he can see that the London that he knew from the 70s has been totally destroyed and replaced by you know a different set. But at the same time, he's actually quite like apologetic for the kind of the existing regime. So you
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? It's almost kind of like he's having these kind of living paradoxes in front of him. But
I
so
think
he yeah, go on.
I'm sorry. I think it's interesting. I was just at like a punk show. I had a friend's band coming through town, and it's this venue here in Pittsburgh, and I hadn't been in forever. Um, it's like a non-for-profit DIY like punk space, but they never stop requiring masks in there. So it's just the funniest thing, and I don't know. I don't know if it's just because I haven't been to like a lot of like of these
Yeah.
DIY shows recently. I'm just like, have punks gotten uglier? It's just like this kind of like amorphous pile of like giant toddlers with bad tattoos bumping into each other. And
Yeah, it's
I was
interesting.
blown away. I mean, I get it, like, social rejects have to go somewhere, but I think it's very funny. Like, I'm getting like memories of like aged hippie scolds telling me like not to run so fast and I'm playing too rough.
It is.
And
Yeah, it
and I
is.
think
It's sort of it's weirdly hippie-ish. That's so funny you say that.
well,
Yeah,
I think that's
strange.
kind of like what these kind of like aging punks turn into. They become scolds. And they have like a bad like community garden tote bag that they carry everywhere. And I think that's the funny thing is like punk is in many ways it was just putting like the edge back into rock and roll, but in another way it was just letting people be as obnoxious as they possibly could be for good fun.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think, and as like a high school kid and as a middle school kid, like who had a lot of energy and not a lot of inhibitions, punk was a good place for me. But I don't know if they would have me anymore.
yeah. Well, it's a very strange and interesting kind of cultural moment. And again, I'm kind of interested with their beginnings because I think there is like when you see some of the figures involved at all, that like they were definitely, I feel like they were definitely used by like the music regime as like as a
Mhm.
vector. So if you see kind of like the like there was a recent Danny Boyle documentary, like sort of documentary about the Sex Pistols, and that's quite good
Mm.
because it kind of it shows you like again the kind of force. The Sex Pistols were a manufactured band, which I think is quite interesting in
Yeah,
its own right.
Malcolm.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Malcolm is a deeply subversive figure who basically like used the kind of just like raw punk energy to as like a
Yeah, because he was
as like
coming out the Teddy Boy scene, and he was doing it. He had a sex shop, and then, well, even after the Sex Pistols got away from him, like who doesn't like Adam Ant, and
yeah,
that's
that's
fun
true.
stuff
I
too.
mean, he's again, yeah. I mean, he's obviously a great manager, but it's just, I think it's interesting because, like, punk is kind of, we talk about this kind of Bappian vital energy. Like,
Hmm.
there is something about that from the original punks because,
Oh, absolutely.
like, they were sort of reacting to a combination of just like a country of total like no hope in like 70s Britain is like there are no jobs. There is no, again, there is literally no future for the guy in the street.
And then also in the music realm, it was like just nothing but like the kind of controlled known space of like stadium rock, which it's great stuff, but it's so inaccessible for a lot of like younger creatives. So it was just kind of, yeah, it was the initial energy of punk is this like very vital, aggressive, very masculine, very male, kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
energy, and going against like kind of the control or the longhouse or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But I think that's the funny thing too is like there's the language, there's a lot of the talk of like all these institutions will be they'll happily like wear the skin of these institutions
Yeah.
right around.
Exactly.
So I think that's the same thing with like whether it's like Nietzsche talking about the Christians of his time or even hippies or the punks. So I think what was like founded by like aggressive, vital, anger, raw, passionate, chutzpah, is now replaced by fuddy-duddy people who love rules and love enforcing the rules
Mm.
to show their kind of moral superiority. Like the punks are now just like wearing patches that say they support the current thing.
Well, exactly. I mean, again, like if you there's the classic interview with the Sex Pistols where they bring sort of their little retinue, like I think Sue from the Banshees.
Yes, yes,
Uh,
or before the Banshees were even formed, I think.
yeah, exactly. And like one of them is like they're literally wearing like a Nazi armband or whatever. And if
Yeah.
you were to do that in like a punk venue today or whatever, you just like genuinely get beaten up. But just like it's just interesting seeing kind of where they start and where they're now. But I think there is a weird similarity to today. And again, I
Mhm.
think that there is like speaking like I'm an old millennial, so I speak
Same
to a lot.
here. Yeah.
I speak to a lot of Zoomers and young millennials. We're in a situation where like people aren't going to be able to afford to buy houses or to like most people are looking at like job cuts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I
the recent jobs report wasn't great, but this could be good for housing. There's just a big lawsuit here in the U.S., but pricing is coming down. I don't know if you ever watched Nick Rockford from $1 Million Extremes. He does a stream about real estate called the Scuffed Realtor. It's very entertaining. I highly recommend it.
I think I've seen him talk about it with Sam Hyde when they do their little podcasting together or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I got a couple rugs from him in exchange for like a couple of my small monster paintings. So I met up with him. It was fun. Yeah. We're out in Rhode Island.
Really interesting character. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he was in the whole Rhode Island area, and Sam was a senior when I was a freshman at RISD.
Okay.
In Providence, Rhode Island. Yeah. So it's this very small world.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, just going back to the punk thing, all I'm saying is that there is that kind of weird, like, I don't know, hopelessness. And I think there will be, like, it hasn't really started to bite yet, but there is increasing pressure. Like, it's different in the US because you guys actually have money. Like, we're pretty broke here right now. And I think it feels like it's getting worse. So I wonder whether there'll be a similar style movement like start to appear, or certainly that kind of energy. But I do feel like
if it goes back to the like enforced only like 4-day a week work week, or you're only allowed, wasn't like in the 70s in the UK, you were only allowed to work so many days a week because of the economy. So yeah, it was ripe and breeding ground for that. And then like because American punk was a little different, especially coming out of like New York. It was still it was more like blown out bohemian kind of thing going on with that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm very optimistic about the future for how bleak things look.
That's interesting. Like optimists are in short supply right now, Zach. So that's good. That's a good.
It's important. You gotta get excited about something.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, we got sidetracked a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to go back to the show, and then so when did it finally happen? Sorry, because that's my fault. I took us on like a 10-minute diversion, but
no, I think it will actually be useful later. I think it's going to come full circle, and it'll apply to when we start talking about the work more. Yeah, so got this show back together, and then the one lady who's like basically just the messenger for this guy, she's like, I knew the minute the show was canceled that wasn't gonna be the end of it because you're being a stubborn bastard and not taking note easily. So yeah, so we got the show going, and then it ultimately worked out for the best. They got a new director. They're promoting, instead of just promoting like the theater productions they were doing, they were promoting the visual arts. So getting a lot of press downtown in Pittsburgh over it. Had a great opening. I made a perfume that I released 50 bottles of for the opening.
Okay,
well,
yeah, you got to tell me about that because like I know a couple of guys who are super into perfume making or whatever. But yeah, tell me about like what was the idea behind that, or
well, I would love to say it was wholly original, but like it was one of these things where it's like, because like years ago I got into like the perfume nationalist, and I had been wearing perfume before then, but then finding like, oh, here's a guy who sure enough is into like avant-garde like media, perfume, soap operas, and like dark music, and is this big gay guy from Austin, Texas, who has a perfume podcast. I've been on a couple times on his podcast, and just having a handful of perfume around, just like thought a scent component would be really fun and like a fun takeaway object for the show. And then also kind of like lightens the, if people are, that's the thing, there's nothing directly offensive in the show, but I think it's one of those things where people suspect that there's something, or they're like, they don't know what it is that they're unhappy about, but they know it's in some way criticizing them. And they don't know how or why. So I'm just like, don't worry. It's just silly stuff. Here's perfume. It's gonna smell nice. You're gonna have a nice time. Don't think too much about it. Why are you thinking about it? Stop thinking about it. I'm just a goofy guy.
And okay, well, I got to ask about like what like can you give an idea of like some of the notes and like sense that you've got inside there, or is this all like a
Oh yeah,
super
yeah. Well, you can get. I
secret?
mean, no, not super secret. It's this is my first attempt at like a perfume, so I was glad it came out well. I sent a bottle to some people, and either they're just being nice or they really liked it. But it's mostly like frankincense and myrrh, and
Nice.
then like there's like some blood orange notes with some orange blossom on it. So this kind of like light, slight like citrus thing in the beginning that rounds out with like the frankincense and myrrh, and then it ends very like kind of like smoky and woody.
Oh, really cool. Yeah, and I guess
Yeah.
that I mean, just the way you
Like
described that.
imagine eating a blood orange in like a Latin mass in like a catacomb. This is the kind
Well,
of like
yeah, I was exactly that's what I was sort of thinking.
you have like
But
the kind
again,
of like scent of your like the the juices on your finger, but everything else around you is like this kind of Latin mass kind of scent.
yeah, it's like an interesting kind of holy moment, or this kind
Mhm.
of like ritualistic, but also again like the liveness of the orange and stuff. But I think that suits your work quite well as well. So that's very complimentary to the work. I guess I got to ask about the bottle because that's the classic thing to do when talking about the
Yeah, I don't actually have any of them here. Otherwise, I would show you. But unfortunately, the bottle is like nothing super special. It's a dark brown, amber bottle with a large gold cap. And then my sister designed a label for it.
Oh, that's
Uh,
cool.
yeah, yeah. I had originally had someone else lined up for it, and then they backed out at the last minute. And then I was like contacting people, and my wife was like, your sister is a graphic designer. You remember that, right? I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. So it's like, hey, little sis, you want to help me out? she's like, I'm so happy to be your second choice. Thank you. I just
Oh,
said,
that's
no, you're
nice.
not my second choice. You're my last choice.
Oh, bless her. Oh,
I
that's
know.
nice.
She's
Um, I was
uh,
it's so funny to talk about fragrances though because like about a year ago I was saying to Fen de Villiers I wanted to
mhm.
do a scent for him called de Villiers, and the bottle would be like his head in like a modernist
Oh,
futurist,
that'd be rad.
but just like it'd been like 90% moustache basically was the original idea. But
Yeah.
I don't think he was that keen on the idea. But maybe I'll try and bring him round after showing off your scent, Zach. So.
Or maybe he'd be into it. Maybe you could design like some type of cast glass bottle for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Because it's like the Romans were super into like anamorphic and like human heads as like drinking and glass vessels. So you
Oh,
can get this kind of like goats kind of like you have like a Viking horn. It looks a little
right.
there's like a goat's head on the end, or again like the head of a god that would then become a vase and stuff like that. And that's all kind of
Or you're just like a white trash hunter in America, so you have the shot glasses that are the upside down animal heads.
I like it. It's just like 50% classical, 50% American kitsch, basically. Yeah.
You know what? It's the proper way.
Okay, so you did your perfume as well, and
Hmm.
and then but you had this idea again. Sorry, what's the title of the show? Just again, just to
Death
get
of
it
a
right.
lunar cult. Because I couldn't.
Death of Lunar Cults. I mean
It,
it's a great name. That
Death of a lunar cult,
sounds
and
so
then
cool already, basically. But
it was either that or I'm suspicious of women. That's the working
well,
title.
tell me about that, like the idea behind it. Like, are you a kind of guy that does the work first, and then there's a theme or like something starting to emerge from it, or um,
Well, this was kind of forming like over the pandemic and just kind of like a lot of anger during that time and a lot of
mm,
rage. And I did the boat burial piece because I'd already planned that, and it was leading into these like you know Greek gods I was doing, and then I really was just thinking about like something like primordial, like the kind of like the dawning of different like epochs or ages, like
Mm.
the movement from like that like Cave of Forgotten Dreams, kind of like earth worship, to like a very like, you know, just like a giant rigid like marble phallus like popping out of the desert, and like, you know, kind of a new life existing from that. Like it was very, very like Bappian inspired with
Interesting.
that. And then like you know, watching Zardoz too many times.
Well, the cult thing's interesting because obviously, is like you sort of mentioned some kind of classical stuff, and when I think of that, already I think what we forget with like Greek classicism, you know, you've got the different ages, the like Attic, classic,
Mhm.
Hellenistic, and we see their kind of pagan worship as this kind of continuous, like, because we're sort of looking through the Christian lens, which is relatively stable for like 2,000 years,
Right.
but even within like 100 years, their kind of like personal myths and legends and kind of pagan worship varies quite a lot. So like if you see the difference between like Hesiod as like a representation of like quite like a few Attic like stories of the Greek gods, and then it kind of it morphs quite a lot, you know,
Oh
as
yeah, or
time.
even the depictions too.
Like again, you have a lot of these kind of like little cults popping up all over the place. Obviously, you got the kind of I think the main gods typically stay similar, but actually there's a lot of movement around the corners, and you know, I think a lot of some of the kind of smaller deities sort of get killed out, or they're kind of tied to place as well. You know, like Dionysus is tied to I think it's Thrace, for example. So like, but because the Thracians did quite well, he sort of
Yeah.
gets cemented into the pantheon basically. While some of the others,
Rather than
like
just like a prior crucified god, he kind of gets elevated more in
yeah,
popularity.
yeah, exactly. But so that, like there are some of the kind of smaller gods that are kind of important for certain towns and cities that just get like steamrolled by the Spartans or whatever, and then kind of they kind of get lost in the to the depth of time basically. So
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I think it's interesting, and again that idea of kind of rebirth and growth as well can ties well into the pieces. So that was the idea, and then can start off with the boat piece, but then you said you sold the boat piece, so that was, I guess that's kind of like a double edged sword there. I mean, it's great, but at the same time, it's like you got to totally kind of replan like what you're thinking. So like,
Well,
where
and
did you
some
go from there?
from that I was like, instead of this just kind of like instead of this just like focusing on like the kind of underworld or the passage into the underworld, which was originally like was the series was going to be. And when I pitched the show, I had the boat piece already pretty much done in process, and or I had it done. I just started like the Greek gods when I had the original curator come over and I was pitching the show. That was kind of the plan. I was just looking for a small gallery space, and then when that piece sold, it's like I'm like, well, this show's not for another year. I'm not going to make this collector wait. I'm just gonna lean into it and like start moving in this. It's kind of just like how it evolves. So instead of just this kind of like, you know, I've always been obsessed with that kind of forever stillness, that kind of like final piece thing of like, you know, I think we talked about this in the first live stream I was on with you, with a lot of the work. And I was thinking like, okay, well, let's go a little different way. How about like, you know, coming out of the shadows, like into like the light was kind of a different energy on this. So I started thinking about like, you know, young men, or like I was thinking of like warriors, or like, you know, who is Tyler Durden. And I was
Mm.
you know, thinking about that, I'm just so fucking angry over COVID, through all that stuff, and I just want someone with a little oomph. And I was just like, let's get some like fucking gorgeous half naked dudes over here. I found them. There's this guy who likes my work a lot, and he's like into pup play, which is like some type of like leather adjacent doggy butt fucking type thing. And he always like takes photos of himself when my work is exhibited different places, and from my work in like full like pup gear. So he has like a leather pup mask hood on, and then he has like these little
This is
paw
the straight.
gloves.
This is the strangest art fan I've ever heard. But I mean, I gotta,
Hey,
he's a devoted fan. So
he
that
likes
they're
to
in
work, and then
reply.
I was like, hey, do you know where I can get like a bunch of like buff like dudes? He's like, I've got you covered. He brought over a gaggle of gays. They're all into pup play, and then I'm like, of course they're late. They're coming down from some ketamine party or some shit like that, and I'm like, calm down, gays. We gotta focus. We gotta get these photos together. Easy peasy. So I'm bossing all these homosexuals around. It was a lot of fun. My wife comes down. She's very titillated by all these like very strapping young men around the place. And I was like, calm down. Don't distract the homosexuals. I need them to focus. You stand there. You stand there. You calm down.
I'm like surprised you got them all in at the same time. So you just took a reference photo. Like, do you not normally work from like life as part of your work, or do you do a little bit of both, or
a bit of both when I can. I mean, working purely from life from a model is like a really nice luxury when you can pull it. Or if you have a very patient spouse who will just sit there for long periods of time.
That's it. I mean, that's it exactly.
Yeah. What I generally do is like, depending on the piece, if I really know what I want it to look like, I'll have the model come in, pose, and I'll do the reference photo. If I'm still working through it, I'll have them move around a bit, and I'll just do a bunch of gesture drawings and go from there until I get a better sense, and then take some reference photos from there. So I kind of have a mixture of both to work from. With this one, because it was just a lot of people, kind of just went for it and was doing some gesture drawings with them, but mostly just like having them strike a couple different poses, work like filter through it. Because some of them, like, I know exactly what I want to do. Like, so like the Perseus piece, this is a very specific pose I wanted, and line that up. But with just kind of them with the warriors just kind of lined up, it's just like, all right, here's a staff. No, it's not a giant penis. Yes, it is a giant penis. This is the whole point of it. The big staff. You got your big stick, and you're gonna be taking over this landscape. But yeah, just see how they kind of naturally stood with it, what kind of poses they liked, and went from there. And then I am one of the warriors also, but one of the masked ones. I won't say which one.
Okay, we have to guess from your body type. Well, that's a game you can do in chat. When you think it's Zach, you got to say in chat. So you've obviously got this idea of like again, like the lunar solar thing as well is kind of like in the kind of Evolian sense that the lunar is associated with femininity and like government through like care and protection, while the kind of solar yeah, exactly. While the solar energy is one of like strength and masculine vitality at the same time. So, I mean, were you kind of doing some insinuations in terms of like, the kind of like the breaking through of the sun over the moon? Are you kind of ushering in a new solar age? Would you say with the work, or is it nothing as grand as that?
I'm not sure. I mean, for my work, it might be like just a stepping thing. We'll see. The next series I'm planning, all it has to do is just kind of like high strangeness, and like somewhere between like Sasquatch and like Hilda Folk, and like with painting my daughter as like a hidden person in the forest and stuff like that. So we'll see where it goes. I might just return back to like the underworld for the rest of the paintings, but this is kind of an adventure in that. But like, I think that's what it was. Like, I did a little write up for essentially both the perfume and the show. Basically, just thinking of like these kind of like dark caves and just kind of like that moving into the wilderness, or this kind of like clearing of smog or smoke, or like on the like silver globe type thing. Like, I don't know. It's like, one thing I'm terrified is I could never go splunking. I could never do that cave stuff. It's just
why can you splunk?
I just couldn't spunk. It's absolutely terrifying to me. Just like in the dirt, like just that type of entombment, or just there's too much mass around you. It's absolutely terrifying. Like
I mean that's the true descent to the underworld. That's how I imagine like Odysseus descending down. He's basically
mm,
doing like a hardcore splunk session till he reaches
yeah.
Hades.
So
Yeah, sorry, you go.
yeah, so I was just trying to think of the opposite of that, and like just kind of like early morning, like a dawn. Like again, it's like the stuff is whether this show is probably one of my more illustrative shows, like one-to-one kind of representational thing. I thought it was like almost a little too heavy-handed with it, or it was just a little too on the nose. But I committed to doing it, so I had to finish it. So we'll see what people think. Because you want a little more ambiguity. You don't want it to be too obvious, and you also want it to be a bit of a mystery to yourself too. You want to be like not sure exactly why it's working for yourself, just so you can have like the kind of like um flying by the seat of your pants thing, where you're like, I think I know what I'm doing, and I hope at least like a part of me that isn't sure of it secretly knows what they're doing. So
No,
yeah,
that's interesting. Like I would say that I'm like the opposite. I'm like super into symbolism and placement and meaning within stuff. But I love that. I love that idea of, again, like just doing something, and it's again not because you know about the kind of platonic platonic explanations of this of like humanity and the soul, where you have this kind of different levels of consciousness. The logos, or the kind of reasoning, but you've also got the I think it's like the like Thanatos, the kind of the chest, the heart or something, which is
yeah,
it's kind of like part of your soul, or what we'd call subconscious today. But it's so it's not part of your body, but it's not control, like it's not this kind of logical sense where you're saying I'm doing this because that. And it's kind of like I like that idea of as an artist, like creating a piece, you're taking it, you're drawing it from somewhere internally, but not necessarily from the place of pure reason. Something, again, just again going back to the idea of the primordial sense or whatever, this kind of deeper place within the body. And then I think the difference between an artist and a non-artist is you can do that, and it looks good, and it still has meaning, if that makes sense. If you asked a guy off the street to kind of take something, don't think about it, and just draw something from your own,
yeah.
like yourself, they wouldn't be able to do that in the same kind of way, because you've built up that
Well, it's
kind of
almost like training. Yeah, it's almost like you've spent your whole life trying to become this kind of shaman, so that you can just kind of trust your gut, or like you can be the
yeah.
most clever dumb person in the room. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, or like you're primed to like when something hits, or why. It's like a jazz musician. You've practiced all this fucking time to be so good, so you can be like the best at making mistakes or improvisation, and have it make a certain kind of sense and logic to it. Um, yeah, I think that's it. It's the kind of like on the field call that can make something really work out and win games.
Interesting. Okay, well, look, I think okay. Last thing I want to ask about before we go into the paintings, because otherwise we'll spend all this time chatting and not enough time looking through the work itself. Like, what was
I
the
could
kind of
chat to you all night, but I know we don't want to go too late. It's much later where you are than it is here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I was going to ask what was the kind of feedback from kind of people coming in and checking stuff out. Like you said, obviously you described it as kind of like trying to assault the normies, and again them feeling like that this is sort of almost something naughty or something. Do you know what I'm saying? There's something that again they're kind of looking to be offended by. What was the kind of general feeling for people? Was it positive, or were they kind of skeptical, and then actually they kind of loved it when they came in there? Or
The opening was great. But then again, it's like, the opening, that's people who already like your work and they're showing up for the first night of everything. I've had a lot of people contact me from the show. I'm going to be doing a Q&A thing in a month or so, so I'm sure people who dislike the work might come to that. so they can, throw tomatoes at me.
Do
We'll
you think so?
see.
Has it ever happened to you before, or just being assaulted by?
No. It's more so when I open my mouth, I get in trouble less on the paintings because they're ambiguous enough, and there's not one direct thing that people can point to. Um, People have said things, you know, in hushed voices and in back rooms, and talked about the work. Certain words have been used to describe it, but you know, none of them are brave enough to say it to my face, so that's fine by me, as long as they're talking about me. No,
Do you feel like they're ever justified in those kind of words at all? Like, do you feel like they've pegged you, or is it kind of like, because often I find when it's these kind of um, I think people often just want to hate the work because of the person doing it, and will
Mhm.
again just kind of like fit it to their their worldviews, or the kind of the things they don't like, and so they're almost kind of like seeing it's like seeing things in the clouds or whatever. Again, you're seeing what you want to see a little bit. So,
Yeah.
but do you feel like any of their criticism is justified at all, or?
No, because they're not really sure how to peg me. They're like, well, he has work at the Satanic Temple, but I've also heard he's on naughty naughty podcasts with evil right wing people. But the Satanic Temple is so left wing, and then he has he has a whole gaggle of gays over his house and gives them all lunch. So I don't know what to do with this person. I've heard him say terrible racist things, but he has one of every one of them. So I think it's one of those things where they're just not sure what to make. I think it's best to always play the fool a lot of the time. It's much more fun too. And then I don't know, but we'll see. Like I think people. The nice thing about the show is that it came together nice. It came together well. Um, I planned it for the space because I was initially with the boat burial and these other pieces. I was trying to find a space for the work. Then I got the space, sold half that work. So then I was building the work for the space. So it laid out very nicely in the space. I had them painted all dark gray, so it feels like this kind of like cave you're going into with the work up. And yeah, the most thing that people seem to enjoy is the titty sphinx. They just really love the tits on the sphinx. It really makes them happy.
Okay.
Well, because it's also a bit of a landmark here in Pittsburgh at the old Allegheny Cemetery. There's a big mausoleum with two sphinxes on either side with like large breasts, and
Okay.
people love to get their
Interesting.
pictures taken by the big titted sphinxes.
Really,
Yeah.
that's so interesting. If you go to Vienna, I know the Viennese are obsessed with the Sphinx for some reason,
Hmm.
and if you go to the Imperial Palace around there, they're literally everywhere. And actually, there is, what's his name? I think it's like Bax or something like that. He has these kind of like ridiculous, almost grotesquely large breasted sphinxes. I know it's an Austrian pastime, but we'll save that for
So,
the
so it's
painting.
like it's like a beer hall sphinx, just like
It's totally ridiculous, but also quite funny at the same time.
yeah.
I want to hear about the space as well, just quickly, because obviously we're not going to be able to kind of, maybe I should have got some photos of the work in the actual
Oh, the
space. But
install,
can you
yeah. I can
can you
probably.
can you describe it?
So so it was an old storefront. So it's basically just there's a glass window. It's long and narrow. You come in. There's a dark cement floor they poured in there, and then you enter in. Right to your right is the 5 foot by 10 foot Sphinx painting with Oedipus, and then you have the lined up along your right there all the warriors, ending with uh Perseus and the head of Medusa, and then we have on the opposing wall all the Greek gods kind of lined up and up right across from the warriors. So kind of like that, and I think that's what it is too. Is like this kind of like other space of the gods, and then the kind of real space of, you know, these warriors, and then the kind of two where they touch, where you have the Sphinx and you have the Medusa, and it's just kind of like that. I mean, it's like that high strangeness where these things where you have the rub of the moral realm to the, like, you know, something that it isn't, or the something that eternal, where you're just kind of like piercing the veil. And yeah, it's something like that. It's something like, you know, these figures coming through the dark, or like it's always there. It's in the waters. If you just have a long enough pole to cast in, you can pull them up. And you're kind of just, they're deep in those caves, and you're staying on the, you know, crust of it. You're outside, and the sun's coming up, and right underneath your feet is just all this energy.
Well, I think that's a good segue onto let's bring up the first bits of work finally. So thank you for everyone being patient with my babbling. And
you're a very good babbler.
Well, I don't know about that, but I think what would be great to kind of start with, I think, is talking about energy, and the cave is the dawn. I mean, would you call it apocalyptic, or like is it pentip? Like, not a triptych. What's after a triptych?
There's
like
5 of them.
Yeah, there's 5, so it's like a pentiptych, I think it is. But did you? I guess they're kind of connected together. You can see from the background.
Yeah, it's the landscape.
But do you see them as kind of like connected together, almost like the kind of triptych style, or is it kind of just thematically grouped? I know it's a subtle difference, but I think it's just interesting to hear kind of what like, how connected are they?
So they are, in my mind, it's one big piece. Logistically, this you know, I compromised. I'm very ashamed of it, but you know, it couldn't have a boat in the basement. They had to be able to move out of the studio somehow. But I think it works as individual pieces too. But like when I'm making a lot of these shows, or when I was making the show, because the space was already established and I knew what I was working with, I kind of like to like make, like when I did the 13 monsters, I knew the space. I like the work to be almost like a bit modular and work with each other. So it kind of like starts to function more as like an installation almost, or like or maybe not like an installation, because I'm not quite as hip and cool as that. It's more like an altarpiece. You know, they're individual pieces, but it kind of adds up to more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, so again, like if you saw the first stream, Zach did a really interesting kind of group of like I think was it the monsters, was it basically like a series of like figures, but in kind of different colors, etc. This feels like way more like, but again, they were kind of similar. So again, it was like that kind of installation cluster of paintings. This definitely feels like a much tighter connection. And again, I like that. Again, there is something of the this like the solar cult to it as part of it. It's almost kind of like a religious object. We've got kind of like I just imagined him as some kind of divine priest. I've used yourself there for the priest in the center.
Yeah, so definitely is kind of like the shaman, the leader, like kind of like the vote, you know, the voice piece of it. And this painter's boyfriend, they came to my Halloween party a couple, not this past year, but the year before, as these like very like bedazzled matadors. And I was like, okay, you got to be in this painting. You're perfect for this. So I used him as the kind of like the shaman piece. It's like, you know, you saw him dressed as a matador. I'm like, this is perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
And
then you've got the kind of the figures either side, and again, I guess, like, you know, I think they're very, very beautifully rendered in terms of, you know, showing the kind of you know, realness and the tones of their body. But I think the colors are really cool as well, because again, it's not just like natural flesh tones. Like again, like I think you've got a very distinct color language in your paintings, and again, it's obviously much more yellows, much more oranges than the normal skin. Again, maybe that's just the kind of photo quality, but again, they're almost kind of like radiating in their skin. Like where humans are much more kind of darker.
Well, yeah, I was trying to
Tones.
get that kind of like internal glow, and then also like I used like ginkgo leaves on the surface for the kind of guess you'd call armor, their clothing. So I had went through actually the Allegheny Cemetery where the Titty Sphinx mausoleum is, and I was gathering, and there's the whole road through there is lined with these ginkgo trees. So not this recent fall, but last fall, I was going through there. I had a whole bunch of books I got from Goodwill, and I was pressing all these ginkgo leaves through all these books, and I had them stacked up in studio with weights on top of them, so that they all be pressed out, and then I adhered them onto the surface and metal leafed them, and that's what kind of made their outfit. So it has this kind of like textural flat quality on their clothing.
That's very interesting, because I just assumed you'd done like a stamp or something like that, but literally put the leaves on there as part of it. That's really cool. But
yeah, it's a little crafty. It's a little crafty, but I also think of it kind of like it could be read as like bad decoupage crafting, or like ideally it's more like a African like fetish object or something like this.
Yeah, that's and again there's something of the primitivism, the kind of the cultish regalia, and then I mean their poses are distinctly kind of classical. You got the kind of contrapposto, so these could be like straight out of either the kind of Renaissance or like classical Greek sculptures, but also something a little bit different on either side. But you've got the kind of the raised arms on the flank here, so it's almost kind of like you've got this
framing kind of, it in.
Yeah, exactly, framing and mirroring that's going on as well. But also this is kind of like more aggressive poses. There's something kind of like, these guys are going to mess you up. The ones that, the two flanking are, I feel like, are more kind of like ceremonial, but there is again the strength and the power, and like it's a bit of a different pose, which is quite interesting. Now, I guess the other thing is the almost kind of like defacement that you've done through the masks again and again. It turns them into like, from these beautiful examples of the human body into these rather suspicious otherworldly characters with very piercing eyes as well. Talk me through about the kind of the face masks, or what do you see them as?
When I was in speaking of like the kind of modular thing, when I was in grad school, I did a series of what was it? It was 6 like mass figures, but there was no eye holes on them, of various shapes, and just kind of like, it was more of this kind of like these kind of like turning them into more like sentinels, or like these kind of like actually like totem figures. So it was like rendered bodies, these masks, so they're kind of like actually like objectified, but then they're like, I was thinking of like these kind of like the sentinels, or like these kind of like spiritual guardians, and how they're functioning like that. So then when I was coming to do this series, I don't know, something about the mask, or just like that kind of, but there's also like the uniform. The mask also like kind of makes you a part of the group. You are in the gang. This is the crowd. You're a Crypt. You're a Blood. You are now in the IRA, and you're gonna do some fucked up shit. So it's like somewhere between like a balaclava and like a wooden board, like primitive mask thing, but it's made out of ginkgo leaves. And so it's kind of like it's their uniform. It's this sect. It's this group, this self-identifying group, and they know each other by what they believe and where they're going.
I really like the idea of the balaclava as this kind of transformative object. Like, it's just by putting it on, you're kind of opening yourself up for violence or whatever. you know, like because it dehumanizes yourself. You know, you can't be identified as well. Your morals are strained. You know, it's that idea of if you know you're not going to be seen, people break the law more. If that makes sense. If they know there's no speed cameras, they're gonna
They can have more fun.
yeah, it will speed more.
Yeah.
But I think there's something similar to that with
or even like lucha wrestling or Mexican wrestling with the masks too.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's kind of entering into another world or whatever. So you know that they put on the mask, and that kind of opens them up for you know to be more dangerous. Like which of the figures is your favorite? And I'll bring them up, and we can look into the.
So I'm actually the one with the leg up, posting on just staying on one leg was my favorite I was working on. I was really happy with his armpit. And then also because like when I laid them out, I was doing a lot of ink stuff in the early phases of it. So if you zoom in, there's a lot of like kind of like ghost marks through it. So like along his rib cage, you can almost see where some of these like ink splotches like come through and add to like the texture. Yeah, see right there. So it was kind of like almost like I left it because it almost felt like bruising along his rib cage, or also kind of like I don't know, one of those things where you're just like
scars or something like that, like he's been torn apart by something, but then kind of healed up. I think it's cool. Even veins on like
sometimes you have these happy accidents, you don't question it too much, or you drive yourself crazy trying to fix it.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And then like obviously the kind of background, you sort of mentioned the cave, but again it's very evocative of this kind of mountainous terrain. But again, it's like one of your motifs is this kind of like silhouetted background or deep dark backgrounds. But this was almost like quite descriptive for you, I felt like, with it from a background perspective. So
yeah, rather than just one line going across, it's actually implying more landscape.
But it was cool because it sort of unifies the pieces. You know, when you see it all together, you get that kind of feeling of the mountainscape, but there's a ruggedness and a roughness again. There's like a rudeness to the
like
to the landscape,
almost.
Which then kind of reflects it's kind of reflecting the personalities of the figures as well.
And when I was working on it, I was like having like, is this going to come across as sci-fi? Like but
there is almost something kind of like if you ever read like H.G. Wells's Time Machine, you know, when he goes to like the Morlocks and the Eloi, but it's kind of like this post civilization or whatever. They're kind of living in the ruins of society or whatever. That maybe this is the pessimist to me. This is us in 10 years' time, basically. This is you know.
That's interesting because I was thinking of it more of like the dawn of time when I was working on it, like this kind of like primordial, unformed landscape, or like going out into this kind of like barren wasteland or type thing. I was thinking a lot of like, there's like a Boyd Rice song, something like about like a Tomb of the Forgotten Father or something like that he did with like a it might have been like a Boyd Rice Death in June collaborative thing. This kind of idea of like the kind of like the ancient like fatherhead, or like, you know, to some was like a god, some was a warrior, some was a devil, but that kind of like ancient patriarch, like unknown, unfamiliar, but ever present.
That's interesting again, because again, like, you know, we would have all had exceedingly violent ancestors that had to do incredible things to survive and just live.
Absolutely. That, or there's two options. Either you had incredibly violent ancestors, or you had incredibly meek ancestors who were just kept their heads low enough that they didn't get chopped off.
Could be. I mean, I choose to believe that mine are from the former rather than the latter. But like,
you seem zesty enough. I believe it.
But but there's something interesting about the anonymity of those people as well. You know, the kind of unknown figures that have shaped human history. So again, goes back to that kind of the masked the masked figure again.
I was talking to a friend of mine. I forget what movie it was that I was trying to get him to watch. It might have been Hard Being a God, or It's Hard to Be a God. But there was another one I was trying to get him to watch. I can't remember. But he was deeply repulsed by this kind of idea of like how violent the world used to be, or how violent his ancestors would have had to have been. I'm like, really? You don't find that like amazing at all, or that this is kind of like noble or glorious in some ways? No, it was one of those things where when you meet someone who like really undervalues like the fact that his own bloodline got him here.
Absolutely lunar energy from your friend there, I'm afraid to say. He needs to
Now there is noble lunar energy, like we're really going out there and gonna have like some kind of like bacchanal or some shit like that. I can respect that,
No, it's interesting, but I mean, like we under again, certainly from my perspective, under the kind of American empire, we have lived through an age of unprecedented peace. And that's why like I'm into cyclical history and stuff like that. So again, you see this as the past, I see it as our potential future, whatever. The time of peace, I think, will soon be at an end, but we'll see. Okay, let's move away from Dawn and into the Sphinx. Now as a as like a subject, I would say that it's like well trod, but in like sort of off the beaten track artists. So I think of kind of like Gustave Moreau and some of the symbolists were super into.
Oh yeah, because the symbolists are super into, because it's a horny depiction. You have Oedipus there. You have this very like kind of isolated / present like devouring feminine energy that will like you're both attracted to, will also like eat you alive, but then how you disarm them by outsmarting them.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, have you seen Franz von Stuck's Kiss of the Sphinx?
Yes, it's an amazing composition. I adore
I mean,
it.
that's the brutal. If you don't manage to win her round with words, but again, there is something almost like vampiric about it. Like
oh, absolutely, like terrifying and vampiric, and it's also like here's the thing: Oedipus must be some type of smooth talker, because like even his own mom wanted to get in on that.
That's true. But what I think so. What I think is interesting is it's like a great subject to talk about and to go through. But like I think your composition is like really really unique. So often like in the more like I said, it's quite popular in the symbolist world, but then they'll often depict Oedipus as shepherd. He's got a kind of a staff. He's got his kind of like shepherd's like sheep's wool clothes and stuff like that. And interestingly,
the male innocent, if you will.
Yeah, and he's got this movement to him, and the Sphinx is quite passive. The Sphinx is like sitting on a rock somewhere, usually something like that.
Or like clinging to his chest weirdly.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you've kind of like got a different take where it's like Oedipus is this static creature, and it's the Sphinx is moving to him. So, like, what do you see this? Do you see this as a specific moment in the story, or like again going back to that kind of interplay between woman?
Well, to borrow a Zoomer phrase, like no thoughts, just vibes.
That again, yeah. I mean, you need to have that as your little description of the painting underneath it. I think that'd be great. Great. But there is truth to that, where again, like she's kind of like simultaneously drawn in from her desire for flesh, but also there's an intrigue, and do you know what I'm saying? That it's not just
challenge too. like yeah, so it's like that kind of moment, like like when you're young and you're like flirting with a girl, and there's that shift between who the fuck do you think you are and oh, okay. And then it's also like, and that's one half of it, but then it's also it's the cat stalking its prey.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that one thing that I did notice was um, the fact that you've kind of gone for it felt very like house cat as opposed to
It
like
is a house cat.
big cat. Because the leg, you know what, the legs are a little bit shorter, like a lion. I draw a lot of lions for some reason, so you can
Are
definitely
you a
tell that.
Leo?
Yeah, well, I think they're just. I'm really obsessed with like St. Mark's lion, the winged lion, as like
Oh
as a
yeah,
figure.
it's a great
But
depiction.
what I like is again that use of the house cat, because again there's something kind of like way more disarming and friendly about it. Like I think you've made this the Sphinx this very disarming. Like her face is very kind of like pleasing and kind of like quite homely and nice, but then again there's that kind of raw sexuality of the bare breast at the same time. So I feel like almost Oedipus is the more threatening figure of the two. Almost there's a bit of weird inversion compared to like how it sometimes is depicted. But so I thought that was really cool. Have you also seen the kind of Ferdinand Knopf? It's not specifically. I don't think it is meant to be the Sphinx, but he
Yeah,
does like a cat lady.
yeah. Is that the one that's in the Neue Museum in New York?
Yeah, it could be. Yes, yeah. It's quite like a long painting,
And
basically.
it's the cheetah body on that, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's yeah. It's the cheetah. Yes,
Yeah,
which is
then
very.
yeah, that is a very disarming photo. I mean, painting. It has its own. It has like a very like you talking about like something that is like okay, it's not a one-to-one depiction. It's not overly thought. It's just like kind of shooting from the hip. Or that's my take on it. It's shooting from the hip and it works. And there's an uncanny quality to it, but that you're feeling you're feeling it. You're getting the kind of uncomfortable anxiety, strange / sexual energy of the whole thing in that piece. It's amazing.
And then like talk to me about Oedipus's pose, because again I think there is like a seriousness, a resolve to him. Like obviously no fear, but there's also like an openness as well. Do you know what I'm saying in terms of his posture? So how did you see kind of like his story in the piece?
Well, I'm seeing him as almost like debating, but like earnest, or like when you're in the bar and you're having a great conversation, you're making a point to like a trusted friend. This might be like a gesture where you're going to them, or you're presenting something to like an unknown person, but a friendly interloper that you're engaging with, and you're comfortable. You're in your booth. You have your friends around you. You might be a couple gins deep, but you have that kind of casual confidence and strength to like really like pull a point out of someone or engage in a dialogue.
Yeah, it definitely feels like almost like he's in the middle of some oratory or some kind of rhetorical, logical argument. So I think that's a really cool captured moment. And then again, the background. Again mentioning caves again. This kind of like dark black with like a grimy brown has this kind of like cave like layer feel to it as well. And I like the format as well. Again, the kind of long landscape size as well. It's a bit different for some of the because I get. I'm trying to remember. I feel like you mainly do in the kind of portrait, so this is a little bit different to your normal work. Let's go to the next piece, which is Perseus and Medusa. So again, this is another dangerous female character. Obviously, the story is Perseus sent on a quest by, I think it's like his uncle, who's sort of trying to trick him into basically dying, and he receives various gifts from Athena and also the sea nymphs, which allow him to overcome this.
Another subject matter that Von Stuck.
Yes, well, exactly. But I think it's it's a really interesting area that's untapped. I feel like all of that stuff's very underrated, so it's very very
I'm
cool.
just gonna go through and slowly, like bit by bit, rip off all Von Stuck's paintings and see where that gets me.
But hold on a second, because he is mining the classical canon at the same time, like 1,000 other artists before him. But you're emphasizing different notes as part of it, and I think, but it's interesting because he's super tied into the rise of Nietzscheanism. He's based in Munich. I've been to his villa actually, so you can go around.
Yeah, because he was an architect and like designer, and I guess he designed that.
Yeah, it's all in concrete. I'm gonna say it's not my favorite building. I have to be honest with you, but he's like, it's quite Greek, but the interior is amazing. And he did have, like, again, talking of the cult, I'm pretty sure he was a Hellenist in the sense of they did a series. He would regularly have like a ritual room in his space with like classical iconography, including a weird idol to Beethoven, I think. No,
Rad.
yeah, it's really funny. But yeah, sorry, going back to this piece. So obviously we've got the kind of I'm assuming either the moment of triumph over the Gorgon, but I would probably say actually the moment of revealing the head to when he's back home. Like what's normally depicted is if it's kind of like post battle, he's got his kind of shield and his wing boots and his sword, so it's a little bit different in that all of his regalia has been stripped away and it's just the man. So there's again like
the man and a certain faraway madness. I was trying to do a faraway madness in his eyes, which is very tough to do.
Yeah, he's definitely got that kind of 60-yard stare. But again, staring and the Gorgon makes sense because again, for those who don't know, that Medusa had the power to turn anyone that she would gaze upon to stone. So there's something interesting there, both in terms of like interacting, like you're asking a question of the viewer, you're challenging them from a, almost a masculine perspective, saying like, I sliced the head off a monster. What heroism are you doing? But also the idea of the power of
what's the BAP quote? Hercules is real, you are not.
Yeah, no, exactly. This is like this is what it is to be real. I have to say, I really think that the Gorgon's head's exquisite. I think this is really really beautiful rendition, and again a little bit different. So I think that Medusa often suffers from like kitsch depictions. So you know what? I've again, it was weird. We've been talking Gorgon because I've been doing some research on Attic depictions of the Gorgons, because I don't know if you know this, they sort of had a different place in their canon where they were actually like protective spirits. So in some of the early Attic temples, they would have these huge like sculptures of Gorgons on the front of it as a positive figure.
Kind of like scaring away evil or protecting the home.
Well, exactly, scaring off the evil eye. They're kind of obsessed with this, like.
Well, you either use that or like a big phallus off the top of the building.
Yeah, well, that is also true. Exactly, the phallus is another power, and I think those guys have this kind of like they depict the Gorgons as these kind of like really quite grotesque women. They've got tusks. Their tongues are sticking out.
Ooh, what fun!
But then you've got kind of like. I would say there's this huge wave of kind of kitschy Medusa style. Like, you know what it is? It's the problem is it's Dungeons and Dragons has ruined Medusa, where again it's like all of her hair is like all snakes, and it just looks so rubbish. And I think you've got
Or
this
like,
really
how about that horrible sculpture of like Medusa with the head of Perseus?
yes, that's
It's like,
it's so terrible in so many different ways. But her depiction is just it's just
well,
gross.
but that's the
It's
thing.
not
The
appealing at
plot
all.
issue, the depiction of it is, it'd be one thing. It'd be a cool take. Maybe you could take it in some like, if you're gonna make something, like, I don't even care about the messaging. Make it look groovy, make it fun, make it cool. But it's just such kind of like stand-in Medusa with just like all snake hair, and none of it's even wriggling. It's like kind of straight. They're trying to make her look kind of attractive. What it is like concept and no execution. And sorry, it was a
No, I
bad
think
thing.
it's valid, and I think
It
it
has no
shows.
blood. It has no blood. It has no life to it. It
Yeah.
has no oomph.
Well, that's it. It's because they read a depiction of Medusa as a woman with snake in her hair, and
And
they're
they
just
go
like,
for the
okay,
most
they're very
sterile version of that.
literally, yeah, it's very literal. I'm going to make every hair follicle a snake or whatever, and it's like, well, where's the like? Because again, what's often missed is in the later versions of her story, she is this beauty who challenges the gods, and or in one version she gets like raped by Poseidon, but she's raped on Zeus's temple. It's so brutal, and then she gets turned into the monster because she defiled Zeus's altar. And it's like it's not really her fault. That's just one, because again this is one area where there's about 5 different like origin stories to her. So she is often depicted as this great beauty at the same time. So I really like this idea of the a beautiful woman who again has got these kind of snakes, and again the kind of use of this almost like gesso-y. What are you doing to give the texture on the snakes here?
So that was actually this metal leaf that I used for the kind of shape and scaling on that, and then I just had a deep tarnish I put on top of it. So that's a very heavily oxidized copper that's giving it
Oh,
that
that's cool.
texture
Okay,
and
that's
shape.
good.
Yeah,
And
these
then I love.
paints are a bitch to photograph, and so like even like so the rays coming out is actual copper leaf with a green glaze laid over top of it, so it has a very shimmery effect to it in person.
I mean, the color is really beautiful as well. I think again, just in terms of the tones, again, I mean, there is the kind of yellowness from the Perseus figure, but again, it's the you've got the contrast with the blues basically from that. So really. Really lovely, and then I love the wings on the head. Again, that's not typically depicted, but I think it works really nicely in terms of giving, certainly compositionally, but also giving that kind of elevated. She is a demigoddess basically, so it's that kind of divine status. And again, going back to the stare, her eyes are closed and his are open. So again, it's like there's an interesting inversion there. Most people depict it as like Perseus looking away as Medusa's eyes kind of zap everyone, but it's the other way around. We're being challenged by Perseus here. But this is one of my favorites. I think this is a really brilliant work. So really, really nice.
Thank you. It was a really fun one to work on. Because I was like, because that's 9.5 feet tall, and I'm not the tallest man, so I was up on scaffolding when I was working on it.
I bet that's very, very imposing. So the next one is Thanatos. Now, I'd say that my classical knowledge is pretty good, but you kind of hit a couple of figures that aren't necessarily like mainstream classical. So you're gonna have to remind me about the history and backstory about some of these guys.
So actually, I had a fun time with Thanatos. This is this autistic jewelry maker guy from around Pittsburgh, and he's fucking hilarious. But he really knows how to hit that Kubrick stare coming in the pose, and he just has fucking great hair. So I came in and just like it was great to work with him as the subject for this.
And then like tell me about the actual like the
Process.
character of Thanatos, like, and how does that kind of fit in with the kind of like lunar and solar themes?
Well, just I mean, playing off with like kind of like Hypnos and Death. I mean, Hypnos and Thanatos, like twin siblings, like sleep in death or dreaming in death. That kind of like always there, like either nightly or at the end of your life cycle, like the looming death, the kind of return to the darkness or to the void, kind of thing, or sneaking up behind you or walking with you everywhere. Challenge of the living man. I don't know. It's one of these things where it's like it's a little more than words, but it just made sense to me to depict him along with his sibling and their parents. And then also just kind of like I thought it was fun to use a switchblade instead of a sai or like your traditional like death thing. So it just kind of like plays a little more like slitting your throat or more criminal in some way or more quiet, like not as like dramatic, like just like kind of like a person coming up behind you and stabbing you in the subway.
So again, for those who missed that, so like again, I do start to remember now. Again, the Hypnos, Thanatos, the brother and sister, and Thanatos he's the sort of scion of death. So again, like obviously he's a very sinister character, and again, I think you've chosen really nice. I think you're very good at getting the right models, because again, I think it's added a lot to the actual figure. Again, I think like the art of choosing like good models has been lost slightly. Like now in Victorian times, they were like certain models would have be like very in vogue. Like there was this one Italian guy that all the pre-Raphaelites wanted to use for like.
And there's that one redheaded woman that the pre-Raphaelites loved. Like she was a stunner. She had
Lizzie Siddle or whatever. Yeah, but, so it's and she gets sort of passed around by all of the artists of the time. So I think it's interesting this idea. Like again, I think that's why I'm less keen personally on a lot of the just like pure digital reference. Like again, you kind of like at least you're working with like real people. Well, often there's this disconnect where many artists today will just like Google an image of someone and then just use that, as opposed to like going out and selecting someone and trying to match their personality and
getting an artist to actually go out in the world and interact with people and approach people randomly. They're too much of a shut-ins for that most of the time. No, I think yeah, finding the right model is its own thing, and it's also like I think there's also such a thing with like I see so many bad there's a lot of bad figurative work out there and a lot of bad work that tries to use symbolism along with figurative work, and I think where they really fall short is they end up with a lot of like generic like Instagram thought beauties or just like very standard, like what they're thinking of is like it's almost like they're overthinking like classical beauty, and it comes out more like bad like cosmetic ad.
Are you thinking of? I immediately think of. Sorry if there's any fans of his in the audience. Is it Roberto Ferri? Have you ever seen it?
Oh, I have to pull it up. Is it Italian? It might be.
It's like an Italian guy, and he's always.
Oh
no, I can't remember his full.
Italian artist and painter Ferri. Let me go pull images here. Yes, I know exactly this stuff. Like, guy knows how to fucking paint. Like we can't deny that. He's better at painting than I am. I will admit that. But
his technique is good. But yeah, but I don't like his symbolism and stuff in his works. Or again, it's just like he tries to be smart, but it's like sometimes
it comes off like. No, don't get me wrong. I love kitsch, but it comes off very hokey. Like it's one step away from being airbrushed on a hood of a lowrider. But that's
that's a good. But
I'm sure he's way more successful but I'm sure he's way more successful than me, and he's actually a much better renderer than I am. So I'll give that to him.
Technique isn't everything though. I think that's what I think.
Yeah.
One thing I'm passionate about telling people who are learning about art is they just think that like rendering is the more I render, the more I'm an artist, or the more I like achieve, and it's just so much more more than that. And again, going back to kind of this piece, I think, well, firstly, you have rendered it very, very nicely, and really captured a sinister energy. I mean, I got to watch out. I would definitely watch out for this guy in real life. I would not buy my jewelry from this chap. He's and again, I like the use of the sort of modernizing of the switchblade as the modern symbol of death. I think that's really interesting because again, the scythe is just like, again, it's just almost kind of kitschy now,
Yeah, and it means nothing to someone in like it's the stand-in, it's the predictable, it's what is constantly used, and that's why it's like in a lot of bad tattoos, it's the kind of the universal thing that is so non-related to like our kind of modern mechanized time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because again, like the scythe would have this idea of reaping and sowing,
and then the seasons and like the harvest and like the winter coming. Yeah, and that kind of depth is completely lost.
But yeah, I like that modernizing, and I think probably again in London, knife crime capital of the world, it's very fitting as well. So one other thing I wanted to say on this piece was, again, the sinister foot. Again, I mean, I would have that, but sadly not.
Bring
again,
back dueling.
The framing device here, where again he's sort of bursting.
Sorry, but no,
he's bursting out of the frames, giving that kind of even. Yeah, he's kind of like coming out even more, basically. Okay, let's switch to his sister. So tell me about her and what you were thinking.
Yeah, so she used to play in bands back here in Pittsburgh, and she's an interior designer. But I don't know, I was thinking about like kind of like dreaming, or like there's those great kind of like photo series of Aleister Crowley with the hood on, is like conceived in a secret, and it's just like the finger up in a whisper.
Yes,
like,
yes.
Come with me, I'm going to show you something you're not supposed to know. And I think that's what's kind of like the fun thing about dreaming, is like, shh, I'm going to show you something. It's going to be our secret.
And her pose as well is kind of like she's sort of leaning into you as well. There's that hunchness to it. Like it's I would say that's, again, it's a difficult pose to do without losing energy, but then what you've done is you've dropped the leg out on the right hand side, and I think that's kind of like, if it was just dress with her hunched over, I think you'd have lost something there. But you kind of pulled it with the foot and the hand, kind of giving that pointers of emphasis as well. I like her eyes as well, because there is like a dreamy, half asleep element to you. So again, she's almost half asleep herself. And again, like really beautiful hair, and it's almost like the moon is lighting it up. So again, that kind of
I love a good nocturne painting. So yeah.
The wings again are interesting. I mean, I was just trying to think of like, so again, me over symbolizing here. You'll probably tell me it's like totally different, but the idea of the wings is escape, like flying off to the clouds itself. So it kind of aligns well with the idea of the dreamer and going to another place of sleep. So
absolutely. And there's also just some great ancient Greek depictions that uses the wings on red too. There's I think it's an old bust. I think the one wing is knocked off, or it's just one.
Yeah, wing. That's the one that Knopf does as well. He does that he adds that a few times in some of his work. So yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So yeah, I really like this one as well. I think that's really nice. So Nyx. So you're saying these are the parents of Hypnos and Thanos.
Yeah,
Oh,
so like night and darkness. And there's not a lot of like there's not a lot of kind of like there is some depictions, but you see it more like modern stuff or like from like video game play. So kind of there are some like simplest painters who you know dealt with her, and there's a lot of like lunar things with her. She's depicted with like crescent moon, a dark veil. So I don't know. Sometimes when there's less material, and let's go off on, you get a little more freedom to kind of
no,
do what
yeah,
you want with.
and again, I think like there's so much depth to the classical canon, but we're obsessed with like about 5 characters in it. So I think it's really cool that you're kind of tackling stuff that's a bit off the beaten path, subject wise. I mean, I really love the model you used again. Like, I think she has a very interesting face, and again, like very piercing eyes, which kind of pull through very powerfully in the piece, and again gives that kind of mystery and connection with the work. But where did you find the model for this piece?
So she does a lot of modeling here in Pittsburgh. She's like, I didn't realize this because she had contacted me when I was doing the monster series. I did
Yeah,
her as one of the monsters, but heavily distorted. And then I was asking for models for doing this, and she contacted me again, and I was like, yeah. And then I guess she's well known in Pittsburgh because people would come over to the studio or was like, is this so and so? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know her name. I forget her name. But she just has a very striking look. She's got a great brow, and she can really hit the poses. But I guess she's like the kind of like go-to who kind of like like striking model here in Pittsburgh, who's like kind of around for like there's more like fashion and this type of stuff. But she's got a good like that brow line is just fucking fantastic. So I used her twice in this series. But yeah, it's funny. God damn, I can't remember her fucking name. But she's very well known, and people kept getting like, "Is this her?" I'm like, "I guess so." Yeah. I was like, "Oh, I know her." So she gets more tagged in more. She gets tagged. I could on Instagram more for my work than I get tagged in my work. Yeah, it's funny.
Just two other notes apart from the model. Like again, I think this is actually one of my other favorites actually. And I really like the textiles for her. So again, like often there is a deep subtlety to the textiles you use. You like, especially with the robes and stuff. It's hard to see what's going on because you're not dropping these kind of like hyper realistic gradients, etc. That there's something almost that they're kind of wearing these otherworldly abstract strands. But because I don't know whether it was just the lighting for this painting or you actively like choosing a different color, you can really see the textiles come through in the drapery, and I think it's really beautiful dress work on this, and also the kind of use of the kind of wrap around over the head as well makes it really interesting. So I thought that was one of my favorites, just in terms of I'm super interested in textiles, you see. So that's what I thought it was a really interesting and evocative depiction of the dress.
It's one of my favorites too, and it's actually I have the robe right. 1 second. So this is the robe that's like sprung a million paintings. I was dumpster diving in the garment district in New York when I was living there, and there just happened to be this striped bathrobe in one of the dumpsters, and I was like, "Oh, I'll take that. It's fantastic, and it's huge, and I use it all the goddamn time, and it's just from jumping into dumpsters in New York City when I was living there.
That's great. Like
I've washed it.
No, you want to get that
Nice
grimy
patina.
New York, yeah, exactly, New York feel to it. You know, I haven't washed it since you first found it.
Yeah, it's good.
With every single model that wears it, you know, its character and is enhanced further. You know. Yeah, that's cool because again, I think it's drapery is something that's really underappreciated, and it's I don't know, it's a bit of a dying art. I think, you know, if you see a lot of Renaissance paintings, they're obsessed with it. You know, the medievals obsessed with drapery as well, but we don't. The modern, like contemporary art, does not do drapery well. So again, that's something it's worth spending time checking out, and that's a bit underappreciated.
It's funny because I barely. So my technique on this is I barely do drapery on these pieces. They're fairly flat, but what's happening here, where you're getting these darker areas and lighter areas, is so I lay out the drawing. I'm using the line to create most of the kind of shape and undulation. Then I metal leaf the stripes, and then I add a tarnish to it, and this kind of starts to settle and create this kind of ethereal, just kind of darkening and lightening across the whole thing. Because I do want this otherworldly thing. It's less of like rendering and more of it's just kind of this like stand-in for fabric, or it's kind of negating the form, or it's enveloping it. They kind of push and pull between like flat and dimension.
Well, I mean, you use the word ethereal. There's something, you know, these are meant to be gods and goddesses, you know, so they're not wearing the normal clothes of humanity. It does remind me a little bit of some of Klimt's, the way that he deals with textiles as well, because again, it's kind of, he often has these kind of quite abstract forms, like big blocks, but then he'll kind of work textures into it. So again, it's kind of like, here you've got that, like, this is the most like realistic, I would say, out of most of the textiles, but the use of the lines gives it that kind of textural element, if that makes sense, and that it's almost this kind of like mini abstract work in the main piece, which I do appreciate. Okay, we're on to, so this is the father now, Erebus, and again, this is another one I really liked. When he loads up,
no worries. They're fairly large files.
The picture quality is just too good quality. We're used to like very poor quality JPEGs on this channel, so you know.
I luckily have a really great photographer here in Pittsburgh. He does like a lot of like food and commercial photography, but he has a bad habit of collecting art, and he likes discounts on it. So he'll photograph the work for you, and he'll do the best job he can possibly do. And he really is the best. And then he just expects a heavy discount when he comes to collect. So he really knows how to yank your chain.
That's good though. I think again that like art bartering again is another lost art. You know, I think you know, that's what it should be about. So.
And when you go to his studio, very well fed, because he has a full functioning commercial kitchen in his studio with an on-hand chef. So
exactly.
It's very nice.
He gets to eat all the meals he takes photos of.
Absolutely, and it starts to show after a while.
Well, I mean, Erebus again. We've got a figure defaced again. So again, this the idea of masking is very sinister character here, popping out of the painting. You know, holding his hands up, you got that kind of feeling of movement with the kind of leg out, so he's almost coming towards you. But there is like, we're not sure whether he's friend or foe. You know, whether he's begging for help or whether he's coming to get us. You know, and I think going back to that idea of ambivalence, you know, like leaving the kind of question there. I think, in my mind at least, there's a bit of a question as to kind of like, what is his purpose and what is he trying to do? But I mean, you just gave a gigantic bear hug, Zach. So is that how you
Well, like,
imagined it?
I think it's more of like a neutral enveloping, like just kind of like just the raw darkness. It's just like it comes, it slowly envelops you. It's coming around you. It's almost like, yeah, it's either swooping in or just kind of like coming in for a hug. It's almost neutral, you know. It's just one of these. It does what it does. It envelops you in darkness.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's interesting because darkness has a typically negative symbolic connotation, but the idea of darkness as neutrality is something that's not explored that often, or like it is just well, there isn't. Okay, there is actually a reading where it's morally like neutral. So if you think like Saint Augustine talks about uh, his view on evil is it's the privation of good. It is not a force in its own right, but it is the absence of good. And in the same way, if you know anything about the physics of light, you know lighter particles like dual wave particles, but darkness is just the lack of light. If that makes sense, darkness.
Yeah. Well,
Dark isn't goodness, but it isn't necessarily evil in its own right. It is just the absence of something that's there.
well, I could be wrong. I can't remember what Schopenhauer who was talking about this, but like that the soul or that the light, that the masculine is the thing. Everything else is the absent of that. So the feminine, the lunar. This is not a thing unto itself. Is the absence of the action.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because like Schopenhauer's, he leans on actually like classical Hellenistic philosophic viewpoints. Well, again, like obviously Augustine's in like the post-classical medieval tradition, but he is like Platonic in his understanding. So like they both come from similar places, but I think there is traditionally more ideas of good and evil in the Hellenistic worldview, if that makes sense. In a kind of like you have these kind of like mega evil entities or whatever. But I really liked him. I especially like the hands. The color work on the hands are really nice. Again, there's this kind of like rising green glow. Whenever I want to zoom in on this thing, it literally just has to reboot the entire pitch, and this is like
No, it was fun working on them because like you get these nice like ambery warms against those cools. For some reason, that color combination always just really gets me excited, gets my juices flowing, and then getting that texture on it, like it's kind of like crackly.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's one of those things where it's just like sometimes like because I render a lot of the under painting or drawing in crayon, it picks up texture over time and gets this lumping effect. And I don't know, it brings a certain life to it. So I've never felt the need to like smooth it out or, overly like go into it. I don't know. It brings a certain like kind of life or material to it, like leather hands or something like that.
yeah. No, I mean, there's like a gritty realism to it. So again, there's a lot of the work is it's the otherworldly, but also sort of made real as well. So, but I thought it was really nice. Erebus, you need to clean your dirty fingernails, though. That's the.
It's dark. He doesn't know what he's crawling into. He's getting dirty fingernails.
He's never invited to polite society. That's what he just wants to hug you so he can get invited to a friend's house. So.
Please, no one ever calls me.
Okay, we're on to the last piece now.
Mm-hmm.
Artemis as Apollo. I will just give a quick couple of minutes on my take on the classical history as this is loading up.
Yeah,
but
shoot.
For those who know, who don't know, Artemis and Apollo are twin goddesses. Artemis she represents, or is often represented as a lunar goddess. She has the inverted moon as one of her symbols. She is the virginal huntress. She will she loves to roam around forests, spending her time hunting prey, eschewing the love of men. Apollo is the also associated with um, uh, like sun, archery, power. He's a warrior. He's famous for slaying the python, for example, and the Pythian games were devoted to him, for example, as part of that. And so they're kind of like they're twins together, but there's the kind of male female disparity, like in terms of like obviously Artemis is virginal, Apollo is quite randy. If you've ever read Ovid's Metamorphosis, famously he turns Daphne into he chases after her and she gets turned into a laurel tree, which is why he's obsessed. That's why the Pythian games you'd have a laurel wreath. So he is this kind of like sexual force as well, as opposed to like Diana. Again, another Ovid story is the famous Actaeon, who was a hunter, chances upon her bathing in the nude, and just seeing her nude body was enough for her to turn him into a deer and then hunt him down. So, I mean, you could say that she is sexually quite opposite. She is very frigid to such a degree that for a human to even glance upon her nude body is a disgusting and a defilement. So, but again, the kind of themes of the sun and the moon come in just talking about those two figures, and we've obviously got a woman as Apollo. So, do you want to hopefully maybe that set up hopefully the piece a little bit, and then you can kind of talk through what you think of this.
So I was thinking of it as kind of like almost without sounding too dumb. I was like thinking of it like kind of like a demiurge, or kind of like out of the canon, or a shift from one to the other, or the kind of like move out of this, or almost like she borrowed the clothing of Apollo one day, or just kind of that like unestablished yet primordial ooze of like the sun just coming up. Not really sure what it is, and this kind of somewhere between like sun rays and antlers, or like the hunt, or hunting as this kind of an early step of like of action and male engagement, and that slow shift into like the sunrise after a night hunt, and kind of pulling double duty, or a certain ambiguity between like the shifts in ages, where the purposes are going to have to need something different. Or it's just again one of those things where it's like tough to explain, but just made a lot of sense when I was putting it together, to have Artemis as like in the kind of like either like as a performance, or an early stand-in, or a telling of the coming of Apollo, or something like this. Almost like Artemis as like John the Baptist.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, there are like quite a few examples where the gods will like dress up as other gods. Like I always think about maybe in like the Frogs, where Dionysus goes to the underworld and he has to dress up like Hercules.
Yes.
It's always a laugh because he's like totally different character. But Zeus often takes the figures of other gods, for example. So like it's an interesting concept about like to lean on, and like the actual figure itself, I think is very, very powerful. It's a very static pose, so it's kind of like typically you'd expect, that kind of solemnity and quietness. but because of like the top torso, it's turned into this very active, very energetic. Like I think again the hands are exquisite here, really beautiful, and also just like add. It's interesting you're saying about the stags. I hadn't even thought or seen that, and that's a really cool. But also, it sort of reminded me of like the crown of a sun. The kind of
Sunrise, yeah.
tendrils coming out. But also, yeah, like you're imagining her hands move as well. So there is that kind of movement and strength to it. But you're also greeted with that very intense stare, and again, it's that same model again, and again, that's a great choice, I think, for the piece. And yeah, I think this is a really, really cool piece. Again, definitely one of my. I'm basically saying that everyone's my favorite so far. So, but I'm going to say it anyway, Zach. So it's all right.
I'll take it.
Okay, cool. So I think hopefully we've kind of taken everyone through, like everything that was there. Just some kind of top level, just post thoughts, having kind of gone through all of that in detail.
Yeah.
I think what's really nice about it is there is this kind of cohesiveness, and it feels like a really tight collection, or kind of a group of works. Because again, often when people will like go off a theme or off a show, they're pulling in stuff from years ago, or like it's just very loose. While I feel like either intentionally or non-intentionally, that there is this kind of strong unifying themes and cores which run all the way through the works and give them that kind of overall harmony, which is quite rare to see in a show. So I think that's really cool. But I think you have got like a couple of standout pieces which are, exceptional, and I think the I'm surprised. Have you sold your Perseus yet? I'll be surprised.
No, I
to
have
hear
not. I have not. Actually, all the work for the show is still unsold at the moment. We'll see how things go over the holidays. But yeah, the funny thing is, like, so yeah, I made all this work like over the period of a year. And then that Sphinx piece I actually made just in the last month, from like start to finish, right before the show opened. So it was a bit of a challenge. So it was one hand changing diapers, another hand just rendering fur on this house cat.
Well, you couldn't tell at all. So I think you've managed to do a great job on it. So tell me, is the show still running now? Can people still check out, where can people see the work if they're in America?
If they're in America, and you find yourself in Pittsburgh, the show is up through February, actually. So it'll be up for a spell. I'm going to be uploading the images from the show to my website here soon. And then my goal is by, right after Thanksgiving, to have prints available of all the work from the show on my website. So we'll see about
that's really cool, because I think again, like certainly I know my audience tends to be a bit younger, and they would love to own a full work, but they're not quite there yet. But so something like a print is a great way of kind of getting into the world of art, and showing you're supporting someone without having to necessarily like buy a big piece. So
yeah, especially, I mean, who has the room for not a 9.5 foot painting? Sometimes I wonder who I make these for.
I'm gonna say it's American houses, I'm afraid, Zach. Like that.
Yeah.
No, it would not be accommodated in virtually any UK residence due to the tiny size of our houses compared to in America. I hate to say.
I can understand. I'll just have to start cutting them in half, and
just do everything in landscape from now on. That's my advice. You can fit those in. So
there we go. No, I'm making this size to honor the gods. That's why I'm doing it.
No, exactly. And again, like they're almost monumental works, and I think that's that. There is a power, again, going back to these ideas of power and vitality, and respect for ancestors, and I think you've managed to capture all of that and more in these works. So yeah, a brilliant collection, and I really hope that people make the time to go to the show. What I'll do is I'll get. Have you got a link to like the details of where to see the show? I'll get it from you afterwards, Zach,
Oh
and then
yeah, I'll send that to you.
Yeah, I'll put it on the show notes so people can check that out, and I'll put it out on Twitter as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, no worries at all. And I mean, Americans drive everywhere, don't they? Even if you're in the next state, you should be driving down and supporting Zach to kind of check out the work. I think so.
Yeah, we measure driving in time, not in distance. So New York is 7 hours from here. Cleveland is 3 hours. So that's how we do it.
That's like nothing to American driving. So that's
Not
like
at all.
Yeah. Any other kind of last kind of thoughts or comments on the work as we kind of round up, or I guess I should say, maybe it's a bit too soon to ask what's next. You can have a bit of a break mentally, or you straight.
I have a couple obligations. I have 2 commissions I need to finish up, but already putting together the next series. Have it planned. I'm starting to, do some poses with my newborn daughter. Some funky stuff. Let me see if I have anything I can allude to.
Is everything going to be like? Obviously, you've had the underworld. You've had like the dark gods and goddesses. Now you've had the kid. Is it going to be all like super happy now? You're going to go totally the other way?
No.
Okay.
It's gonna be
for aliens.
It's gonna be a mixture of like just kind of like high strangeness stuff. So like Hilda folk, Sasquatch, dark figures in the woods, something kind of like ancient and eternal, that kind of like all those like thin spot type things. So basically using like when you grow up in a rural area, you get that kind of like uncanny feeling in certain places, and I don't know. I'm just gonna let my imagination run wild. And
there's a really interesting. Yeah.
Oh,
we don't have. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
We've got a bit of lag. We've got a bit of lag now, so you can keep bumping into each other. So you go for it though.
Yeah, so it's just gonna be very. It's thinking a lot of like kind of like Appalachian folklore, Mothman, these kind of like maybe more contemporary ancient things, or like these things that feel very ancient, that there's a little more of a kind of current pin you can put into it, like a Mothman or a Sasquatch or a UFO, but try to make it feel like it's still something of ancient origin.
Okay, I mean, it sounds really interesting, and I think all of those things, I think, like play into like the human subconscious, and that their fears of the unknown, and again, there's something about like pattern recognition in like dangerous places. People see things in forests, and that puts them on higher alert, because it's the forest is traditionally like a dangerous place. In like I would say that our folklore is like older than the American one, so it's kind of like got more developed stuff. But like we, for example, that there's one motif which is kind of interesting, which is like the Green Man, if you've ever heard of him.
Mm-hmm.
But he's this kind of like quasi-pagan figure that kind of went through to medieval times, but he's kind of associated with like the leaves and the green. Well, there you go. You see, hiding all along behind, waiting for me to say. That was not a planned segue, but
no, looking over the whole time. We have our own Green Man here in Pittsburgh. It goes back and forth between Green Man and Charlie No Face. I did a painting of him when I was fresh out of college, but there's this kid who was bird watching, climbed up a pylon tower and was electrocuted and lost both his eyes and his nose and one of his ears, and he was just covered in scar tissue. And he'd walk up this stretch of highway at night, and if you Google, you can find pictures. People like teenagers in the 50s go find him, get their picture taken with him. So that was it was called Green Man because of the scar tissue in the early headlights. Apparently, it looked green in the darkness. But that's a little more recent memory, Green Man here in the Americas.
Very, very grisly tale, but no, that sounds really interesting. So we'll be on the lookout, and hopefully, speak to you soon about your next work. Are you gonna try and go for the next Passage Prize at all, or do something?
I'm gonna try to. Well, yeah, because I didn't get just so freaking busy. I didn't even realize they were doing a second round, so didn't submit anything. But there is I guess they are doing some type of event in the new year, some type of award thing in California. So I'm gonna try and make it out to that. Glad hand and talk to people and see what some of these groovy creative people are doing.
No, I think it's a great idea. Like I would say, I don't know if you saw the Passage Prize or the Passage art book they produced for the second season.
Yeah, it looks great. Like the leopard. I love a good animal print.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So like, I think what's cool about those guys is that they're really upping their game every single year, and it's looking more and more professional. So I think that's really interesting.
It's the new punk rock scene.
Well, exactly, like going back to punk again. We've got to use the energy from the desolation of society to create amazing art.
And we'll start pogoing.
Well, I don't know about that. Zach, any final words about the work or stuff that people should check out? Where can people kind of follow your work? I guess in Instagram.
Instagram is probably the best place. I've recently started like a Twitter, just Zach_Brown_art on Twitter, on X, just because might as well. And I don't know. I just want to thank you for having me on again. I know there was a bit of back and forth because this show date kept changing and the finishing work kept changing, and then you understand baby schedules. So, but thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's always a pleasure, and really cool to review that excellent work. So we'll leave it at that. It's quite late UK side, but
get to bed.
Hopefully, people will tune in tomorrow morning. But thanks very much, Zach, and we'll catch you all later.
Thank you so much.